Hello and welcome to the Foxhole cast, an All for the Game reread podcast. I'm Una.
And I'm Nate.
Today we'll be covering Chapter 3 of the Foxhole Court, in which Neil gets acquainted with said court. Quick update on AFTG since our last episode.
All right.
The Rainbow Crate special editions of the original All for the Game trilogy just came out, and people are starting to get them in the mail. I was up until 4 a.m. this morning reading the bonus chapters that come with the special editions. I don't want to do any spoilers for those yet because people have not even had a chance to read them yet, but I will just say that there's a short story from Wymack's POV included, and it's his perspective of what happens after he tells Neil about the Moriyamas, which happens in a couple chapters away from where we are in this book. So I think that when we get to that chapter, we should, also do the Wymack POV scene.
Ooh, that's fun. That'll be fun.
Also, before we begin, our anonymous read-along buddy is back with some Chapter 3 thoughts. First, they start off by saying that although the 1978 Rollerball movie is good, we should watch the 2002 version if we want god-awful bad movie cheese.
Holy shit.
Which we do.
I'm so excited.
So the ask goes on in reference to the Foxhole Court Stadium. 65,000 people. That's Hard Rock Miami Stadium big. How rich are the inventor's family again? And that's for the jobbers. The jobbers being the foxes who are the worst at the sport. And the inventor Tetsuji Moriyama's family is super rich, but his stadium is the Ravens' Castle Evermore, which is even bigger. The ask goes on, meanwhile, you got Neil having an anime protag moment as he looks it all over. Nick, my Geiger counter is going crackle crackle, and I can't tell if I'm just giving off gay or if it's coming from your cute ass. Help a dude out and set me straight. Or gay? Neil, exy. Maybe I'll grow to like him, but I feel like Eddie from Ed, Ed, and Eddie anytime I see Kevin's name. Hope that changes.
I haven't, for all of our listeners who have never seen Ed, Ed, and Eddie, what does that mean?
Well, okay, so there's a bully named Kevin in the show.
And they don't like Kevin.
Yeah, they don't like Kevin. Side note, do you remember in 2015 or some shit when Tumblr was briefly obsessed with shipping Double D and Kevin from Ed, Ed, and Eddie? Or was that just a fever dream I had?
Wait, 2015? I feel like in 2015 I was just looking at screenshots of Tumblr on other worse apps.
Interesting.
So no, I did not. I believe it though. I don't think that was a fever dream. I can believe that happened.
I'll find some Keved fan art to send to you.
I am so excited for this.
The ask goes on, tell me I can have your game. Again, has anyone seen Challengers?
Literally.
Yes, and I am sure that we will find a million ways to bring up Challengers while covering these books.
Yes.
And then Anonymous ends with a question for us. Are there any fan artists on Tumblr who have really nailed the look of the team in your view? Because last episode we were talking about how different fan artists portray the different characters. And yes, I do actually have one artist in mind. Tumblr user Cherry and Sisters, all one word. They're not super active anymore, but back in high school I was following them for Percy Jackson fan art. And then they started doing Raven Cycle and Foxhole Court stuff right before I got into both those series. So I saw their character designs before I actually started reading the books, and that's pretty much how I imagine the characters. I'll reblog some of their stuff to the Foxhole Cast Tumblr so everyone can see.
Nice. I don't think I have any particular fan artists whose names I remember, but anyone who draws Neil with red hair, even when it doesn't make sense in the story for him to have red hair, is golden in my book.
Yeah, so thanks so much for that ask. Should we get right into the chapter?
Yes.
Where we left off, Neil and the monsters left Wymack's apartment and were headed toward the stadium. The chapter starts with Neil's narration giving us a description of the Foxhole Court Stadium. It's bright white and orange with giant fox paw prints on the outer walls.
So basically it looks just like the first copy of the Foxhole Court book.
Yes. And it's supposed to fit 65,000 people, which, as far as I can tell, is like a solidly medium-sized stadium for a big university.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Fun fact, the Frank Howard Field at Clemson Memorial Stadium in South Carolina, where Nora Sakovic went to college, fits 81,000.
Ooh.
And that's a football stadium. So, slightly smaller than Sakovic's college's football stadium.
Nice.
Neil wonders if Palmetto State University regrets spending all the money to build it because the Foxes suck so bad. But Neil is thrilled by the idea of what it must look like on game days. Then there's some more description of the gates and entrances to the stadium that I honestly cannot parse.
I was trying to think about that. So first of all, why is there gates? I'm not saying this is a criticism of the book. I'm saying I don't know how sports stadiums work. Why are there like 25 different gates? I guess it's just to let people in and out. But like, that's a lot of, maybe it's like, is there a gate to each section?
Yeah, that makes sense to me, that there would be multiple parking lots and multiple entrances.
Oh, yeah.
When there's a crowd flooding in, they can't all go through one gate.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but like this book, in this chapter, we get a ton of description of the stadium, like both outside and inside. And like, I don't know if it's just not well described, but like, I don't think that we need the description of like every parking lot and gate and what the entrance is like.
That's true. Like, I do like, a lot of what I like in this chapter is how deeply we are in Neil's head of like, fuck yes, it's Xe time, go, let's Xe right now. And I feel like this description of the stadium helps with that, but I feel like it doesn't, like, there's not really any point later in the story where it's like, oh shit, the Ravens are coming in through gate 7, so we need to intercept them. Like, this never is super relevant.
Right, that's what I was thinking too, is that the fact that there's a barbed wire fence around the stadium is like not relevant.
I totally forgot. Yeah, why?
Like, it never gets brought up again. There's no reason that we need to know that. And I feel like it would have been better if we had just edited that part out.
Yeah, I agree. Like, it could give a foreboding air to the stadium or make it feel like, but first of all, I feel like the stadium is always positive for Neil. And
Yeah.
Second of all, later when the Ravens are fucking with the stadium again, the barbed wire fence, nobody's like, oh, they would have gotten us if not for the barbed wire fence.
Right, exactly. It doesn't stop the Ravens.
Right. Maybe that just means that later we can infer that the Ravens were so determined to criticize the actions of the Foxes that they were able to circumvent that barbed wire fence, like with their hands bleeding and everything. And it was really fucked up.
Yeah, like, I'm just thinking in Sunshine Court, there's actually a part when the fact that there's like an electronic keypad on the outside of the door, like, it has relevance because we can't get into that.
Uh-huh.
There's like a whole scene. But like, it becomes relevant to the plot in a way that it never does in the Foxhole Court. So we don't need all that information. We can summarize that. And I feel like a lot of this chapter is like paragraphs of, these are all the rooms in the stadium. This is like the hallway that leads to the stadium. And it's just confusing and unnecessary.
Yeah.
Anyway, Nikki leads Neil to a door with an electronic keypad and tells him the code right now is Wymack and Abby's birth months, which Nikki thinks is proof they're in a relationship. Nikki asks when Neil's birthday is, and he lies and says it was in March. This is another instance of Neil telling us that he's lying, but not telling us what the actual truth is.
Oh my god, yeah.
Yet. Because we don't learn his real birthday until it happens in a later book.
Oh, right. And yes, a big old party. And it's really fun. I love that he not only lies about his birthday, but he also makes sure to pick a month that already happened so that they can't celebrate it with him.
Yeah. Well, I think that Neil Jostin has a birthday.
Oh, okay.
Officially. Like, whoever's identity he stole to be Neil Jostin has a birthday that's in his, like, files already, so he can't actually lie about that.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that birthday actually is in March, I think. But it is nice that it already happened so he doesn't have to deal with them celebrating it until next year. Nikki asks what Neil's girlfriend got him for his birthday, and when Neil expresses confusion, Nikki says, "Cute face like yours has to have a girlfriend, unless you swing my way, of course, in which case, please tell me now and save me the trouble of having to figure it out."
I feel like, what did your girlfriend get you for your birthday is like a similarly sneaky question to like, does your mom know you're gay?
Yeah. I think Nikki is honestly, like, I'll talk about this in a bit, but,
Ooh.
like, I used to think he was so annoying, but I actually think that some of the, like, flirtation he does in this chapter is a little clever.
I have to agree.
I'll tell you about it later, yeah. I have thoughts. The narration says, Neil stared at him, wondering how Nikki could care about such things when the stadium was right there. They knew the code to get inside, but they were standing around like his answer was the secret password. Neil looked from Nikki to the keypad and back again. What's it matter? He asked.
I'm curious, Nikki said. He means nosy, Aaron said.
I don't swing either way, Neil said. Let's go in.
Bullshit, Nikki said.
I don't, Neil said, and impatience put an edge in his voice. It wasn't quite the truth, but it was close enough. Are we going in or not? So here we have asexual king,
yes.
Neil Jostin, demisexual king. Sakovich said it herself in a Tumblr post. Neil is canonically on the ace spectrum. It's just Neil Jostin and Jonathan Sims out here being genre fiction asexual protagonists.
They should have a support group meeting, but I don't know that it would help either of them.
Neither of them would say a fucking word. Oh man, everyone go listen to the Magnus Archives podcast.
And then come back here.
Yeah, and then come back to this podcast.
Just real quick, just 200 or so episodes. No worries, no big.
The episodes are short. You'll get through them so quick. So yeah, asexual Neil is very close to my heart. And I love this scene where he's like, I don't swing, because that comes back.
Yes, I do remember that.
And I love the line, it wasn't quite the truth, but it was close enough. And this is like another, like, Neil is kind of lying to Nikki, and he kind of lets us know that he's lying, but he's not going to get into the truth yet.
Right.
He's like, we don't have time to unpack that. But aside from that, I do want to talk about Nikki, because reading the Rainbow Crate Special Edition bonus chapters has opened my eyes a little bit about why Nikki acts the way he does. I won't say any, like, specific spoilers for the stories, but I've kind of realized that in this scene, Nikki isn't just interrogating Neil and being annoying because he's nosy. He's doing it so that he can find out right off the bat if Neil is homophobic.
That makes sense.
And he's kind of doing this as, like, he's, like, testing if Neil is, like, safe to be around, basically.
That's so true. And also, if Neil is homophobic, is he going to have to worry about Andrew beating the shit out of him?
Yeah.
I never even thought about that. Yeah, he's, like, they're near a bunch of other people, so he's relatively safe. That's so true. That makes sense.
Yeah, and he's doing it in a really flirtatious, annoying way. And Nikki's flirtations are not always great. We'll get to some other ones that are not good. But I think it's interesting the way that he is interrogating Neil in his own Nikki-like way.
Right. I feel like it actually makes sense that it's flirtatious and annoying, because if he was just like, hey, do you hate gay people? Neil could be like, no, don't worry about it. But if Nikki actually pushes his buttons, he can see, like, if Neil is going to get really annoyed with him.
Right. Nikki is going to be his most authentic self right off the bat, and he can judge Neil's reaction.
Yes. And Neil's reaction is, of course, why are you thinking about gay sex when the Execore is right there?
Literally. And Kevin, I imagine, is thinking the same exact thing. Kevin ends up opening the door for Neil. They go in, and Kevin shows Neil the right key to use to get into the locker room lounge area. The narration says, Coach Hernandez occasionally let Neil sleep in the Millport High locker room, but it never occurred to him to give Neil a key. Instead, he looked the other way whenever Neil broke in. Keys meant Neil had explicit permission to be here and do what he liked. They meant he belonged. Again with the key motif.
Yes, the key motif. And also I love that Coach Hernandez is just like, well, he needs someplace to sleep, but it would probably be weird for me to give him a key, so I guess I'll just let him keep breaking in to the gym, and I'm not going to ask how he knows how to do that.
Right.
We're not going to talk about it.
So in the lounge, there are 3 chairs, 2 couches, a TV, and a wall of photographs of the Foxes. A lot of the photos feature the 3 women on the team, and we get some exposition about them. The book tells us that Exy is a co-ed sport, but teams generally don't like to recruit women. The first year that the Foxes existed as a team, Palmetto wouldn't let Wymack recruit any women. After the Foxes' quote, train wreck first season, they let Wymack sign 3 women, and he made Danielle Wilds the first ever woman to captain an NCAA Class 1 XC team. Now we turn to our sports consultant, John, for an explanation of what NCAA Class 1 means.
Nice!
Hello. So, first things first, the NCAA stands for National Collegiate Athletic Association. It's basically the governing body for all sports programs at colleges and universities in the USA. Secondly, over the years, as sports have become more and more popular and more schools have athletics programs, the NCAA has stratified into 3 divisions. Truthfully, most people say division, but class is also technically fine. They're the same thing. D1 is all of the big name schools, the ones that have a ton of funding and support for sports, the ones that have like athletics woven into their school pride. Those are often going to be Division 1. These are also the schools that are really heavily into recruiting young athletes. They like get TV deals the most easily for broadcasting the games. Division 1 schools also expect the most out of their student athletes regarding how much time and energy and effort they need to devote to training and like committing to going to games and all of that. So yeah, Division 1 is the like big dogs of college sports, but they're not the only ones. There's also Division 2, which is similar to Division 1, but basically just like less extreme. They do recruit, but not as heavily. They do sometimes get games televised, but not as much, and they're not as impactful. Division 3, meanwhile, is the bottom of the barrel, and I don't mean to say that there are no good Division 3 athletics, but like there's a reason they're classified the way they are. They also very rarely recruit at all. They usually just pull from the students who are already enrolled. And while they are still competitive, like you can't really have sports without competition, it's usually not as heated or as relevant to the school identity. The reason I mention the other divisions is because, especially with a new sport like XC, and especially for a school that seems to not be very big or powerful in other sports like Palmetto State, and I know it's a fictional school, but even in universe it seemed to be not really that big of a college, I don't know why it would be classified as a Division 1 school. Because if it's a Division 1 school, that means all of the other sports are also Division 1. It feels weird to say Palmetto State that has this like bare bones XC team, which I think probably means its other sports programs are not that good either. I don't understand why it would be Division 1. It is much more common when there is like a younger school or a less experienced school that has not had as much sports history to first be classified as Division 2 and then move into Division 1 over time if their abilities and name and recognition and skill set grow. That is clearly not what has happened with Palmetto State. The only real possibility that I can see that makes sense in this situation is that there aren't enough teams nationwide that are actually existing for college XE. But given how meteoric the rise of this sport seems to be in the last few decades, to the point where there is a professional XE league, if it's gotten that seismic of a cultural phenomenon, there should be at least 2 different divisions of XE teams. It makes no sense for Palmetto State to be scrapping with the big boys. Now, plot-wise, sure, it makes sense. Realistically, it doesn't. So, yeah, this is what NCAA Division 1 means. Back to you, Una.
Apparently, Danielle had to put up with a lot of shit her first year, but now, 3 years later, she's proven herself as an aggressive and unrelenting leader. But the photos on the wall show her smiling with, quote, a toothy grin that was equal parts menace and mirth. I love that description.
Yeah, love the alliteration. Mm-hmm. Always good.
Nikki sees Neil looking at the pictures of the 3 women and says, Dan's good people, but she'll work you to the bone. Allison's a catty bitch you should avoid at all costs. Renee's a sweetheart. Be nice to her. And Neil asks, or else? Nikki just smiles and shrugs. And I'm wondering if he's kind of trying to hint, like, if you're mean to Renee, Andrew will fuck you up.
Oh my god, but he can't say it in front of Andrew.
Yeah.
I also just love that he completely writes off Allison. It's like no nuance of what's that thing when they write in the burn book of Mean Girls?
Oh.
It's like that.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's like a mean girl, but yeah, Nikki is also being a mean girl right
Wait.
now.
Nikki's like, you're on my side, first of all.
I think Nikki and Allison's relationship is really interesting because we don't get that many like actual interactions between them. But I think that Nikki and Allison could really get along if they wanted to.
They really could, but I feel like Andrew is what keeps them apart, as it does with pretty much all of Nikki's social relationships.
Yeah. And Seth also keeps.
Oh, right. I forgot about because Seth is homophobic. I forgot about Seth.
We'll get to that later.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that Nikki and Allison could, like, really be best buds.
They need to be kept apart because they would be too powerful together.
Yeah, they would be, like, too powerful. Exactly. Kevin opens the door to the men's locker room and lets Neil get a quick glimpse inside before continuing down the hall. They enter a large room where the press can meet the Foxes after games, and Andrew sits down with a bottle of pills. Kevin brings Andrew the whiskey they stole from Wymack, and after Andrew gets out a pill, he gives the bottle to Kevin.
The bottle of pills. I had to read that a couple times.
Oh, not the whiskey.
Yeah, he gives Kevin his pill bottle, and I think he takes the whiskey bottle.
Yes.
Yes.
Andrew hangs on to the whiskey. Kevin takes Neil into the stadium itself, and even though the lights are off, Neil can see enough of the inner court to imagine what it'll be like during a game. So, as I understand it, the layout of the stadium is like, in the center, there's the court itself, which has plexiglass all around it so that they can bounce the balls off of it. And then outside of that is what they call the inner court, which is where the refs and the cheerleaders and like the non-playing team members stay. And then outside of that are the seats.
That makes sense. I thought that the inner court was just like referring to like an ice hockey field, how there's just like walls around it, and that's where the court is, and then everything else is on the outside. But here, court refers to like a court of people. Like,
no, I mean, I don't know why it's called the inner court. I think it's just like, it doesn't make any sense. If anything, it should be called the outer court.
Because the courts, yeah.
The court where they are playing the game is in the center, and then outside of the plexiglass walls are where they chill when they're not playing.
Okay.
Where, like, the substitutes are.
Okay.
And then outside of that is, like, the seats. There's nothing separating the fans from the inner court.
Okay. But it might be, I'm imagining, like kind of in baseball, how there's, like, walls.
Yes.
And then there's, like, the dugout or whatever in front of it.
That's what I'm imagining, too.
All our combined sports knowledge. And it's, like, Voltron, but...
But, yeah, I don't know why they call it the inner court, because the innermost court is where they play the game.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be the inner court?
That's what I always thought. But yeah, it's not. I guess that's just court, but...
It's just the court?
But then the inner court is on the outside of it.
Yeah, I have no idea. Anyway, Aaron turns on the lights and Neil goes to the plexiglass wall to put his hands on it. There are scoreboards and TVs hanging from the ceiling, and the floor is glossy wood. You know, in the episode we did on chapter 1, we wondered about the floor of the court, and I guess it really was wood the whole time.
Nice.
Because we had theorized that it was like...
rubber.
Yeah, not actual wood, but like maybe the fake wood that they use in gyms sometimes.
Oh, right.
But I guess it is just wood, and it was here the whole time, and I just missed it.
Dang. I guess that makes sense. They play basketball on a wooden court.
Yeah.
Bowling.
True. Foxhole Court bowling, eh? The bowling league.
Oh my god, and at the end, Rico just straight up tries to smash Neil's head in with a bowling ball.
Yes! Oh my god! That would work so well! I'm sorry, I'm like cracking up now. Andrew has to go off his meds so he can bowl.
Yeah. Oh my god, he's just sitting there like fucking horking down like nacho chips and like really greasy french fries so that he can like have the energy. They all have to wear the fucking shoes.
Yes! Fuck, that's good.
Neil's like,
We have to win the big game,
The big game.
to defeat the Japanese mafia who are
Also-
sponsoring this bowling league.
Yeah. They're like, oh my god, the second half of the game is Cosmic Night. And they turn off all the lights and anything could happen in the dark.
The black lights illuminate all the blood
Oh my God.
splattered upon them.
Yeah. This really has a lot of
man.
potential.
The Raven's Nest is still underneath the stadium, the bowling court. What do they call it?
What the fuck?
The bowling lanes.
Alley.
The alley.
Bowling alley.
Yeah.
Why do they call it an alley?
Yeah. The bowling alley.
Did you know you can actually die if, like, you go where the pin setter thing is and, like, you go in it and the pins get set on you or whatever?
I can imagine that there's some mechanisms back there that would crunch you up.
That makes sense. I guess I was just surprised. I was like, I didn't know that bowling could be so dangerous.
Oh, I bet someone's written like a bowling AU.
Oh my god. Yeah, it's somewhere out there.
It's probably out there somewhere. Anyway, Neil is in awe at the stadium, and the narration says, he'd made the right decision. The risks didn't matter. The consequences would be worth it. He had to be here. He had to play on this court at least once. He had to know if the crowd screamed loud enough to blow the roof off. He had to smell the sweat and overpriced stadium food. He needed to hear the buzzer sound as a ball slammed inside the white goal lines and lit the walls up red. Nikki says, "Oh, no wonder he chose you," meaning Kevin. I love that part.
Yes.
When Nikki is like, "Oh, we have another Kevin." Because Kevin and Neil basically share this reverent obsession with Exy.
Do you think they ever go to the court after hours and just kind of smush their faces against the wall and just stand there together? They never talk about it.
Kevin's like, "It's part of the Raven drills I'm teaching you." They do go to the court at night.
Oh, right.
So
The night court. What the oh, that's like at the...
that's from A Court of Thorns and Roses.
Yes, fuck.
We have the Sunshine Court in All for the Game.
Oh, and then
We have the Night Court in Court of Thorns and Roses. I wonder if, like, what the title of the next two Sunshine Court books are going to be.
Ooh.
And is one of them going to be the Night Court?
Ooh.
That would be fun.
That would be very fun. That would be another crossover situation. I don't even remember what we were talking about.
Nikki just said his, "Oh, no wonder he chose you" line.
Oh, right.
So everyone goes back to the foyer press room place, and Neil notes that Andrew has disappeared somewhere. In the locker room, Neil finds the locker with his name on it, and we get a paragraph-long rundown of all his outfits and gear, which does not matter.
Although I think it, like, again, helps to establish how into this Neil is. Like, I like that he's like, yay, I get a new shiny uniform. I think that's fun.
That's true. Yes. It is important to Neil that he's never had things that were, like, made specifically for him before.
Which probably means that all his other clothes were too big.
Yes. I think that might be a detail in the narration at some point, because he talks about how he dresses just to, like, blend in. I might be misremembering, but I think at some point he says all his clothes are, like, not well suited to him. But yeah, because one of the things that he has in his locker is a bright orange windbreaker with his name on it. And, like, Neil's never had anything that was, like, made for him with his name on it, you know?
That's so true.
So you're right. It is important that he has all this stuff that he never got before, and it's like a brand new shiny racket, and, like, he never could have hoped to have any of this stuff before.
Right. And he wants to press his face into the racket, which I love.
Oh, I love that detail. I have a note about that later.
Oh, excellent. And also, like, obviously it's important to know what clothes they're wearing, so if we need to write scenes of them stripping, we know, like, what they take off first.
Nikki explains that Dan commissioned the orange windbreakers because she was tired of everyone trying to look past the foxes and pretend they don't exist. He says, "Everyone hopes we're someone else's problem to solve. They don't understand. They don't know where to start. They feel overwhelmed and give up before they've taken the first step." The narration says, Nikki gave himself a small shake and smiled, melancholy instantly replaced by cheer. And he explains how it was Renee's idea to donate a portion of their ticket sales to charity. I love this little scene with Nikki. He kind of, like, gets really sentimental and, like, a little bit, you know, melancholy. And then immediately he, like, snaps himself out of it because he's like, that's not who I am. He's like, I need to be the fun, cheerful guy. Yeah. There are parts in this book where Nikki is written very poorly, but I think overall Nikki is a really interesting character. And I love that here he's talking about, like, everyone hopes we're someone else's problem to solve, because later we learn how he moved back to the United States from Germany to take care of Andrew and Aaron when he was like 18 or something.
Right.
It would have been so easy for him to just stay in Germany and be like, that's not my problem. And he like doesn't even barely know Aaron and Andrew.
That's so true.
But he decided, like, no, I'm gonna take responsibility for my cousins.
And they repay him by continually trying to stab him.
They do not treat Nikki well at all.
I'm like, 5 years he's been single momming these two guys and they suck.
Yeah.
Like, I guess it must be nice. It's probably nice for him. Like, he's been rejected by his mother and father, so it probably is important to him to, like, have a relationship with these two new relatives he suddenly has who, like, I mean, I was going to say as far as he knows aren't homophobic, but honestly, Aaron
is kind of homophobic.
Aaron really needs to fucking get his act together. Like,
I have a note about that later, too.
Oh boy, okay, anyway, but yeah, it is wild that he really, like, dropped his whole life to come back and be, like, a guardian to them.
Right.
And also, like, go through school with them, which is kind of another wild thing.
Yeah, the fact that he's a sophomore like them, but he's older than them, and he's like a guardian figure to them, but suddenly they're in the same grade at college?
Right? Like, he doesn't, like, to be a guardian, you wouldn't necessarily have to, like, be with them all the time, but for Andrew, you kind of do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and, I mean, just the fact that he left the love of his life in Germany to come raise these shithead cousins, and he had to, like, buy a house for them to live in and stuff.
Yeah.
This man has a mortgage. Nikki's really one of the strongest characters, and I feel like we all overlook that quite often. But yeah, so I love this part of, like, Nikki saying, like, we as the Foxes are overlooked, and everyone thinks, well, that's not my problem to deal with them. But Nikki, in his life, has specifically been like, no, this is my problem.
That's so...
Because you're my family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Family means it has to be your problem.
Yes. Neil takes his gear to the bathroom to change his shirt in a stall, which is cramped, but he's practiced at it by now. The narration says he could put on shorts around the others, so he returned to the main room to finish dressing. This is another instance of Neil keeping information from the reader. Like, he doesn't even tell us why he doesn't want the others to see his torso.
I never, like, reading this, I never considered that. I'm just like, sure, whatever. He's just not mentioning it. But yeah, that is something, too, that he is deliberately withholding, basically.
Yeah, and I think that this is actually something that Nora Sakovich does really well from the get-go, is, like, if she wanted to be more straightforward and explicit about what Neil had going on, she could have easily said in this scene, like, he has all these scars on his chest. But we don't get that information until later. She, like, holds out on us, which I think is really smart, and it creates this great effect of, like, we don't even know who Neil is.
Right, like, you just want to keep reading to find out what's up with this guy.
Exactly.
But also, I feel like I didn't conceptualize that the uniforms had padding, and that was just, like, I finally noticed this time, I'm like, oh yeah, there's padding, like, I have to put that in my mental image. Like, when I was envisioning them, I was gonna fucking say gaming. When I was imagining them playing the game, I was just imagining them, like, bareback slamming into each other and, like, bones clanking and stuff. But they do have padding. But at the same time, I don't want to imagine it as big as, like, football player padding, because I don't think that that's sexy. So I'm kind of imagining, like, minimal but present padding, like bulkier shoulders, maybe.
Yes, I think that it's probably comparable to lacrosse padding.
That makes sense.
Because they need the range of movement to, like, be able to swing the racket and run around, but they do slam into each other all the time.
Okay, that makes sense. And also the collar, I'd need to look up if, like, the neck padding that he has.
Yes, to keep a ball from slamming him in the throat.
That makes sense. I'm like, that's great. And we're not talking enough about that they're all wearing
collars.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the detail about how he says it makes him feel like he's choking sometimes. because that is a sensory issue I also have.
Right.
When shirt collars are too tight.
You're sitting here right now in a shirt where you cut the collar out of
I
it.
literally cut the collar out of this shirt so that it wouldn't be too tight. So me and Neil have that in common.
Yes.
I could not wear
Uh-huh.
a collar for sports like that. It would freak me out.
Yeah, that does not seem pleasant.
Yeah, but it protects his delicate neck.
Yes.
Then we get a whole paragraph of him putting on all his gear, but the most important detail is that he pulls his bangs up under an orange bandana. First of all, just the fact that a bandana was included with his gear.
Very true.
In Fox Orange. Second of all, I would like to personally shake the hand of every fan artist who has ever drawn fan art of Neil with his hair tied back in a headband or a bandana. You're doing the Lord's work, and I thank you for your service. I love seeing art with Neil with his hair back in a bandana. You know that boy doesn't cut his hair nearly often enough.
Right? I'm like, personally, I want to see all that, like, dank, sweaty hair, like, in his eyes. But
different strokes for different folks.
Truly, it takes all kinds in this world.
Neil retrieves a racket, and the narration says, "It smelled brand new and felt like a dream, and it was all he could do to keep from smashing the taut net against his face." I love that part.
Yes.
He's just, like, so silly. Like, his Exy obsession really just overrides all rational thought. It's kind of, like, childish. He's like, I got this shiny new toy, and I just want to, like, put my face in it.
Right.
It's really cute.
Yeah.
The narration says that the racket was ordered specifically for him, and this is just like, again, Neil has never had anything made specifically for him before, because at Millport he had to use, like, an old racket, and this is new for him, just for him. It's really nice.
It's kind of like in Harry Potter when Harry goes and gets all his stuff at Diagon Alley.
Yeah. I think there is something to be said for, like, a lot of this chapter is, like, this is all the stuff Neil gets. This is all of the gear he has to put on. But I think there is something to be said for, like, kind of taking inventory of all the cool new stuff that he gets.
Right.
It's satisfying.
Yeah, in the same way that it's set at Harry Potter is like, wow, I have all this money and all this cool new stuff. It's like we really get what is exciting about this world for him.
Yes, absolutely.
And it also helps us understand what he's even, like, working with here.
Yeah. When Neil asks about Kevin, who hasn't changed into his gear like the rest of them, Nikki says Kevin only tolerates being on the court alone or with Andrew on it. And Andrew is currently out cold somewhere due to the fact that he just took his meds. According to Nikki, Andrew is going to, quote, crash and reboot into crazy mode. So Andrew's meds make him sleepy and then hyper?
Yeah, I guess I interpreted it that, like, he's going to crash from not being on his meds. Then the meds will kick in and he's in crazy mode. But that doesn't really...
That makes sense to me.
Okay. And also he did take them with whiskey in a very supernatural move. So maybe that's probably not, like, helping things
Not
incredibly.
good. Yeah.
See, if I was going to drink whiskey and then lay down, I would get acid reflux from hell. Like, with a pill, Andrew, you're on borrowed time.
Andrew just has a stronger digestive system than all of us.
Fuck.
Maybe it's the secret is all of the ice cream he eats.
Yes. Oh my God, that's it.
We all need to be eating more sweets just like Andrew.
And taking more drugs from restaurants.
Yes. Neil asks, "You don't think he's crazy now?" And Nikki replies, "Crazy? Nah. Soulless, perhaps." Which is so mean.
Yeah, damn.
Nikki, how could you say that?
That's your son. You need to love him unconditionally. Yeah, that is. And also strange. Like, I would not describe Andrew's being, like, weird and rude, but I wouldn't describe him as soulless right now. And it's interesting that Nikki,
Yeah.
like, I mean, I guess Nikki has been around Andrew when he's been, like, violent towards Nikki.
But I feel like Andrew's violence is a testament to him not being soulless.
That's true.
Like, Andrew is violent because he cares so much. And I feel like Nikki should know that by now.
Yeah. Yeah, that is strange. Like, plus Nikki knows that, like, Andrew feels more fuzzy when he's on his meds, was also semi-related. I was thinking of a theory that that the fuzziness Andrew feels when he's on his meds is like dissociation.
Oh.
Because sometimes if I do a really cool thing called I don't sleep, but I still take Adderall, life hack, I get like more amped up, but also I start like freaking out a little and just like dissociating, like, or not dissociating, depersonalizing, like drawing back a little, like, hang on, I'm in here. What's going on out there?
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if that's what he means by fuzziness. Cause I was like, that would maybe make sense.
That's
with
interesting. Yeah.
Because that would be an uncomfortable sensation.
Yeah.
What were we talking about before?
But could you keep that up for days on end? Like, Andrew is in a constant state of that when he's on his meds, supposedly.
I think for a lot of people, they are like I think that's a thing that happens a lot, of like dissociating a lot.
Huh. Interesting. I like that theory.
Thanks.
I want to hear what other people think, too.
Yeah. And wait, what were you saying before? Meds, soullessness.
Nikki should know that Andrew cares.
Yeah, and Nikki should know that Andrew doesn't like being on his meds. So like Andrew feels that his meds suppress who he is. So it's kind of fucked up that Nikki says without his meds, Andrew is soulless.
Mm-hmm.
But he's had a rough 5 years, so we can excuse.
It's interesting how much Nikki does understand Andrew and Aaron versus how much he doesn't understand them. Because there is a lot of stuff about Andrew that Nikki does not understand. So even though he's like been their guardian for a while, he understands like their behavior well, but not necessarily like why they act the way they do. Specifically Andrew, I guess. Like,
that makes sense.
Nikki understands that Andrew does these things, but he doesn't understand why.
He hasn't really been let in the twin bubble.
Yeah. So after Nikki says that Andrew is soulless, Neil expects Aaron to defend his twin, but he doesn't say anything. I would actually give anything to know what Aaron is thinking right now.
Ooh.
Like, I used to think that Aaron was so boring. I could not care less about him. I was like, why are you even in this story? But after a couple rereads, he's like fascinating to me. I'm
intrigued to know why, because I still, like, what I think Aaron is thinking in this song is just like nothing. Like he's playing Pong in his head or something.
That's what I used to think too. I'm like, oh, this man has nothing going on. But actually, I think that he really does. And one of the Rainbow Crate bonus scenes is from Aaron's point of view.
Oh, right. You told me.
And it gives a lot of insight into what's going on in his head at any given moment regarding Andrew and Neil. And it's an excellent scene. I was having like a breakdown at 4 a.m. about it.
Didn't you tell me you were like, your eyes were welling up? You were like, I should go to sleep. No, I'm going to keep reading.
Yeah, literally. I couldn't stop. It's like, it's really good. Nora Sakovich has become a very good writer. Like Sunshine Court and these bonus chapters are really fucking quality. Anyway, I think that Aaron has a lot of opinions about what's going on around him, and he has opinions about Nikki and Andrew and Neil. He just never shares them, you know, in a way that the readers have access to.
Right, which usually would make him seem mysterious, but I feel like he just seems unengaged. But clearly that's not true.
Yeah, he actually does have a lot going on, and I had just never considered that before. And maybe there was like a way to write him to make it seem more obvious to the reader that he has a lot of internal stuff going on. So I agree that he comes off as like he doesn't care about anything that's going on in these books, but like he definitely does. And I think that he probably does have like a lot of thoughts about Nikki, his guardian, calling Andrew, his brother, soulless.
Right.
And Aaron probably has his own opinions about whether Andrew is soulless or not, or crazy or not. But he just keeps that all to himself because he doesn't like Neil and he doesn't trust like anyone enough to share his opinions.
Right. He doesn't really have a reason to communicate with anybody around him because he's basically just doing what Andrew tells him to because he feels like he owes Andrew or he's like forcibly connected to Andrew. Like, I feel like maybe that's why he doesn't share his thoughts a lot of the time because aside from like small things like don't sing that song or like stop annoying me by saying this, it's mostly like he doesn't feel like he has a lot of input about what's happening in his life because he's just taking cues from Andrew.
Yeah. And we get a little bit more in books 2 and even more in 3. But even then, when I was first reading these, I was like, I don't get why Aaron is here. But like now I do. Mm-hmm. And I can't put my finger on exactly what changed in my perception of him. But I do think it's funny that Neil just like assumes that the twins are super close because they're twins. So he thinks, like, surely Aaron is going to defend Andrew against Nikki. But, like, he doesn't. And it's really interesting to me that Neil just assumes, like, oh, they're super close.
That's so true. I mean, to be fair, he did see them literally swap places to, like, bamboozle him. So I feel like that that level of Parent Trap bullshit seems to indicate, like, some closeness.
Right. But they're not. Like, Neil is reading that as, like, oh, they're partners in crime. But they're not.
Right.
Like, Andrew is the criminal mastermind here, and Aaron is just, like, following his orders.
It's like in Criminal Minds, whenever they're like, there's two unsubs, and this one's the dominant one, and this one's the submissive.
Yes!
This one's the sub-unsub.
That's not what they call it, right? Dominant and... dominant and submissive in a partnership.
I think so. I feel like they say dominant, but maybe not submissive as much.
But yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that... Ooh, serial killer AU.
Yes.
Someone's definitely written that.
Yeah, it's barely a fucking stretch.
Yeah. It's funny that Neil is automatically like, oh, they're super close. But, like, Andrew and Aaron only met, like, 5 years ago.
Right.
Or whatever. So, they're really not close. Neil asks if Kevin can really play after injuring his dominant left hand so badly, and Nikki says Kevin's playing right-handed now because he's, quote, an obsessive genius.
I actually, if you were going to say, I just remembered I watched a video recently about making yourself ambidextrous.
Ooh.
Because I have my fucking nerve damage war wound arm. And I was like, I should start being ambidextrous so I can do, like, hurdy things with my left hand. And first of all, I had fucking heard a rumor as a kid that, like, if you try to make yourself ambidextrous, it will drive you insane, which is
I've never heard that in my life.
No, I feel like I was just like, oh, damn, I wish I could be ambidextrous, but I'm worried I would drive myself insane. That's not apparently true.
That's why Camilla Hecht is like that.
Oh my God. That's not apparently true. I found a couple of videos saying, like, we don't know why people have a dominant hand, but it seems like it's just like, first of all, one thing that interests me, they're like, it's more efficient to have one hand adapted to certain tasks and have the other hand focus on other tasks. And it was like, there's not really, one hand isn't really better than the other hand. It's just more suited to specific tasks. And if you try, like, if you're drawing, I'll have my right hand drawing and I won't really think about it, but my left hand is holding the paper.
Right.
And if I try to switch it and have my left hand drawing and my right hand holding the paper, one thing that I realize, and that you realize in general when you try to get your dominant hand to do non-dominant hand tasks, is that it's difficult to make your dominant hand do the supporting stuff. I think
so interesting.
Right? I think it was a YouTube comment that was like, it's surprising, like, it needs to be a seamless assistant. And it's surprising that, like, that requires training. Like, both hands are specialized in different things. And anyway, all that aside, so it is possible to make yourself ambidextrous. And I've heard that the best way to do it is by writing with your non-dominant hand and just writing every day with your non-dominant hand, and it'll get better and better.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Kevin could totally make his hand. Kevin could, I don't know how it is for sports, but Kevin could definitely get his right hand up to a level of goodness that would match his left hand. But also, we find out later that Kevin does switch back to his left hand, and I was wondering if you were going to say something about that.
I wasn't going to mention it here, but yeah, in the last book, and it's like a really iconic moment that Kevin switches back to his left hand. And I guess it's just, by that point, it's healed enough that he can go back to it. Oh, and he practices with his left hand at night.
Oh, right, yes.
When they do their Raven drills, practices at night, Kevin practices with his left hand.
Right.
Even though it's slightly injured.
Yeah, and I was wondering, because at first it made it seem like, oh, this injury he can never play with again. And like in Challengers, can we do spoilers for Challengers?
Yeah.
Okay, when Tashi injures her knee, it's so bad that, like, she can't get it back to the same level it was before, like, physically cannot. And I assumed that it was like that with Kevin in his hand, and that's what the book implies at first. Mm-hmm. Or, like, the book seems like it's saying, but then later it's like, actually, he worked hard, and through the power of working hard, he overcame that, which makes me... I don't know, I was curious about whether that was like a thing that Norisakovich was like, okay, it seems like his hand is impossible, but actually he does make it work again just because that's how dedicated he is toward Exie.
Yes.
Or if she just kind of changed her mind, like, no, it was, they thought, like, I guess they think it's an injury that's career ending, and then later it turns out it's not.
Yeah, I think that everyone thinks that Kevin will never play again. And then, like you said, Kevin is just such an obsessive genius that he takes such good care of the injury and like is really dedicated to practicing with it, is like through sheer force of will he gets like the use of his hand back.
That's cool. Okay, because when I saw Kevin playing with the hand that had been broken, I'm like, isn't it too soon, bro? Aren't you fucking it up worse? But I guess...
Yeah, I don't know, I guess, the specifics of that, and I wouldn't be surprised if that is another thing that Nora Sakovich just made up for the story. Like, it's just some sports anime shit. But, like, yeah, I don't know.
I think I would be willing to accept that as sports anime shit. Like, I thought it was like, oh, he's so dedicated that he's actually making his hand worse. And it's like, no, he's doing what he needs to do to recover, which is difficult and frustrating, but he still does it.
Yes. Yeah, I think the main idea is that Kevin is so dedicated to Exy that he makes it work through magical powers,
yes,
or sheer force of will.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, that makes sense in universe.
Yes, exactly. Those are two different things. Yeah. It makes sense versus makes sense in universe. Good distinction to make with these books. In response to the obsessive genius comment, Aaron says, "It's not genius, it's spite," and Nikki agrees. I don't know, I just like that. Because Aaron also hates Kevin. Like, Aaron hates everyone right here. So I don't blame him for not, like, speaking his mind more often.
It's actually so funny that, like, Andrew is, like, known as the guy who's, like, a huge misanthrope and is, like, always fucking with everybody. But Aaron also just fucking hates everybody and is also super open about it.
Yeah.
Like... And his difference is that he doesn't feel the need to, like, physically hurt people.
Right.
But it's kind of amusing that he's just, like, he's normal just because he's just a dick. Like, he's just a regular guy who kind of sucks.
Yeah. He just expresses disdain for everything, but he doesn't actually, like, go after anyone in particular, I feel like. Right.
He's just like, I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
I wasn't even supposed to be here today. Oh, I feel like I also like that it kind of shows that after getting to know Kevin, they don't have that star haze around him anymore.
Exactly.
They're like, yeah, this guy's just fucking weird, like all you other weird fuckers.
Yeah. Now that they know Kevin as a person and have had him as an assistant coach, they know that he's just, like, this really obsessive guy who is a little bit, like, unwell about Exy. Yeah. Kevin pounds on the plexiglass to get them moving, and Nikki yells that they're doing this in their free time, even though Kevin can't hear him. Neil thanks Nikki for agreeing to practice with him, and Nikki says, "Don't worry about it. You can make it up to me some other time when the others aren't around." Aaron tells Nikki not to flirt in front of him. I actually find Aaron's, like, minor homophobia throughout the series to be kind of hilarious, because he has no idea that he's the straight cousin.
Oh my god, that's so true. That's really funny. He's like, it's just me against this one, it's all of us against this one freak, but it's like, no, it's just you.
It's just you, Aaron. Get with it.
Get with it. I just like that he specifically says to Nikki, don't try to get ass on my time or whatever.
Yeah, the wording. Yeah, I really want you to read the Rainbow Crate bonus chapters, because Aaron talks a little bit about his homophobia.
Nice.
It's really interesting. Aaron says he'll tell Eric about Nikki's flirting, and Nikki explains that Eric is his fiancé. He was Nikki's stay-home brother during the year of high school when he lived in Berlin, and they moved in together after graduation. I've got a continuity error for you.
Ooh.
Here it says Nikki did his study abroad in Berlin, but in the extra content, Sakovich said he lived in Stuttgart.
Oh, shit.
So, what's the truth?
What is the truth?
Neil is apparently too distracted to make a note of the homestay brother part of that sentence, because he's too busy trying to figure out if he and Nikki were living in Germany at the same time.
Oh, right. Which I feel like is reasonable, but also, what are the chances that Nikki saw him and, like, noticed but didn't say anything? Like, I guess this is just Neil's, like, distrustful mindset where he's, like, has this idea that Nikki knows he's been in Germany but isn't revealing it yet for his own purposes. But, like, I feel like if Nikki had seen Neil in Germany, he'd be like, oh my god, I saw you in Germany when I was hanging out with my brother who's so hot.
Yeah, I think that it's probably pretty irrational for Neil to worry about this. Like, how would Nikki remember that he saw some random guy in Germany? But, like, I think that's just Neil. I think he's just stayed alive this long because he is that paranoid.
Yeah.
And Neil figures that he and his mom had probably left Germany by the time Nikki arrived there anyway.
Nice.
So they did not cross paths. Nikki says the reason the twins speak German is because they took it in high school knowing he could help them with it. He flirts obnoxiously with Neil again, and when Aaron demands they start playing some goddamn Exy, Nikki tells Neil, "Remind me to show you Eric's picture later. Our babies are going to be gorgeous." And I know the joke is probably that Nikki and Eric are both guys who can't have biological kids with each other, but also trans Eric real.
Trans Eric real. Either way, I just love that line. That line is just so... I love that he just puts that out there, like, in universe, this thing does not make any goddamn sense to say, but he's like, he's there, he believes it. I love that he just throws that out there as like, he kind of knows he's being ridiculous, but he's like, my boyfriend is so cute that our babies will also be cute.
Yeah.
And also I'm cute and will help with these cute babies.
Yeah, I love
so good. He's so funny.
Yeah, honestly, Nikki has some good lines. Most of them aren't until like book 2, though.
Yeah.
Nikki says Eric still lives in Germany, and Nikki originally only came back to the US to get the twins through high school, but then Wymack recruited the 3 of them, so he stayed. And we're gonna get the whole Minyard Hemmick family backstory later, so we don't need to get into it now. But I do want to point out that Nikki is actually one of the oldest people on the team. He's a sophomore like Andrew and Aaron, and sophomores are typically 20 years old, but Nikki is 23. So he was like 18 when he adopted the twins, and they were like 15.
Teen mother, SMH.
That's insane to me. Like,
right?
That's wild that Nikki was a guardian to people just 3 years younger than him.
Right? How did that even, like... I don't know how this shit works, but, like, I'm surprised. Like, I feel like you can't just show up and be like, I'm 18, I can be a guardian. They, like, investigate you a little bit first. And, like, I feel like that would have meant that his parents, which I would believe, but his parents would have had to say, no, we're not going to be the guardians.
Yes.
I have no idea, actually.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if they explained that. I assume that Nikki knew that his parents sucked, and Andrew and Aaron would not want to live with them. And it would be better if he was their guardian.
Yeah. And the alternative would have been them probably going back into foster care.
Yeah.
Also not great.
Well, Aaron was never in foster care.
Oh, right. Right.
Andrew was. But yeah, the only teammates that are older than Nikki are Seth and Renee, and they're both upperclassmen. I just find it really interesting, like, it's gotta be weird for Nikki being older than all of his classmates, and also being, like, graduating age.
Right.
If he only did 4 years of college and he had started at the typical age, then he would be graduated.
Right. And also that he's kind of like, they definitely have divisions, like, here's the upperclassmen, and then there's Andrew's crew. And Nikki is as old as the upperclassmen, but is still considered a part of Andrew's crew, so they still kind of, like, treat him, I feel like they kind of treat him, like, as if he's younger or more stupid, and it's like, no, he's like, older than most of y'all.
Yeah, exactly. And he's more adult, because he, like, has a
right.
husband and a house.
Right.
And
legal children.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I love that Nikki, because, like, later, especially in, like, books 2 and 3, we're gonna get a lot more of Nikki trying to be friends with the upperclassmen, and it's so sad that he's, like, their age, and he wants to be friends with them so bad, but Andrew just, like, won't let that happen.
Right.
And Nikki probably has a lot in common with all of the upperclassmen, but Andrew just doesn't allow that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's wild that, like, he's just kind of, like, on a break from his regular life. Like, he has a whole thing going on.
Right.
And he's just here taking a time out to be on this fucking roller coaster.
Yeah, just as like, well, I guess if college is free, I might as well do it. Yeah, and Nikki's not even that into Exy either, and he's not even that good, but he's just, like, doing it because his cousins are here and he might as well get an education. Yeah, it's interesting. Nikki, Neil, and Aaron practice for an hour and a half, with Neil learning new drills and playing against Aaron and Nikki. The 2 backliners aren't the best, but they're better than the high schoolers Neil played with. When they stop practicing, Neil is disappointed, but then he remembers Nikki saying they're giving up their summer break for this. Neil tells Aaron and Nikki they're good players, and Aaron says Kevin doesn't agree. Aaron says that Neil's not completely terrible, and he can see why Kevin picked him. Outside the plexiglass, Andrew lies on a bench and plays catch with an Exy ball, and Kevin is staring at Neil. Nikki warns Neil that Kevin is an asshole, and he's even managed to make a medicated Andrew angry, which isn't supposed to be possible because the meds are meant to keep him happy all the time. They leave the court, and Nikki tries to reprimand Andrew for drinking too much, but Andrew doesn't care, and neither does Aaron when Nikki looks to him for help. Kevin makes a comment about Neil's inexperience and tangles his fingers through the netting of Neil's racket. He tries to take it from Neil, but Neil hangs on. Kevin says, "If you won't play with me, you'll play for me. You're never going to get there on your own, so give your game to me." I'm, not exactly sure what this means, to be honest.
Yeah, I feel like this is an iconic scene, but at the same time, I'm like, wait, why is this necessary? I feel like Neil is already he seems pretty dedicated, and Kevin's just like, no, you need to fucking submit to me body and soul, or you're not going to be able to do this.
Yeah. And that makes sense based on Kevin's upbringing, but, I don't really understand what the whole, give your game to me line means.
I feel like it's basically just, do everything I tell you in learning how to play this, and I will shape you into who I think you need to be.
That makes sense. Yeah, I guess Kevin is just asking Neil to, trust him and to do his best.
Yeah, you could also say that. I think it would be so funny if Neil was actually wait, what do you mean by that? And Kevin was like, I want you to trust me and do your best. And Neil's like, oh, okay.
We just have to be more dramatic about it.
Right.
This is all for the game.
That is. On page 62, I noted Kevin is so fucking dramatic.
All the time. I love him.
Yes. And that's just, he's not even doing that on purpose. That's just how he was raised.
That's just how he is.
He just thinks that level of intensity is required for every situation.
I can't wait for you to read Sunshine Court.
Oh my God.
Kevin has some really dramatic lines, and Jeremy is like, anyway. Neil asks what Kevin means by never going to get there, and Kevin says he should be able to figure it out. The narration doesn't say it explicitly, but I think Neil suspects that Kevin means the U.S. court, because it says Neil is, quote, pretty sure there didn't apply to someone like him. Because later we're going to learn that Kevin wants to make Neil a star, wants to get him onto the U.S. court with Kevin and Rico and Jean. So Kevin is telling him to follow all of his, instructions, give his game to him so that he can make him into a Exy star. And I think that Neil suspects that this is what Kevin is getting at here, but Neil doesn't want to admit that Kevin actually believes that that's possible for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Neil's just like, well, this is about in line with the other levels of homoeroticism that I've experienced today. Maybe that's just how things are here.
Kevin covers Neil's eyes and tells him to forget everything else and just think about his Exy career. Neil thinks this is silly, but Kevin tells him to focus. Neil remembers how Exy was the only highlight of his childhood, and how his mom would drive him out of town so he could play Little League where no one knew who his dad was, even though they were accompanied by gun-toting bodyguards.
Do you think people ever were afraid to strike out Neil or whatever, or they'd be they vaguely know that this guy is up to no, his family's his family clearly is powerful, and he's just here at the Little League with two guys with guns, and they're if I score a point on this guy, are they gonna break my kneecaps?
I suspect that the guns were probably concealed.
That makes sense.
They've got not blow their cover.
They've got those beer belly things that you can wear to a baseball game where you can put beer in a pouch.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
I have not seen those.
I've never seen that. I've just heard the legends.
Huh. Yeah, probably that's what they had.
Yeah.
Not just regular holsters on their jackets.
Exactly.
The only times Neil ever saw his mom smile were when she was cheering for him. The narration says, Neil didn't know how long he played with his Little League team, but his hands remembered the weight of a racket as well as they did that of a gun, and that thought makes him remember that his Neil Jostin persona isn't real. I love the imagery of the racket versus the gun.
Right.
He's weighing his two futures in his hands, and he's thinking, these were both part of my childhood, and I have to choose between them.
That's cool. And that he needs to be reminded that Neil Jostin isn't real, and that he can make promises that he doesn't intend to keep.
Right. It says, it was cruel to even dream he could stay like this, but Kevin had escaped, hadn't he? Somehow he'd left that bloody room behind at Edgar Allan and become this, and Neil wanted the same so bad he could taste it. In answer to Kevin's question, what do you see? Neil answers, you.
Aww.
So cute.
Then Kevin's like, details. What am I wearing?
Oh my god. I think when I first read this series, like back in high school, I had no idea like what the ships were. Like I had just heard that there were gay ships, and I was like pretty convinced that Kevin and Neil were gonna get together.
I honestly feel like a Kevin, Andrew, Neil, Challenger style throuple would really, really work very well.
I know thousands of fanfiction writers who would agree with you.
Excellent. We are legion.
Kevin pulls on Neil's racket again, and this time Neil lets him have it. Kevin says, tell me I can have your game, and Neil says, take it. Kevin tells Andrew, Neil understands, because he's been trying to get Andrew to take Exy seriously for like a year now. Andrew says, congratulations are in order, I suppose. Since I have none to give, I will tell the others to respond appropriately.
I love when he talks like that.
Yeah, it's so silly, but it's just so, like, Andrew. Like, people don't talk like that in real life, but love it. Andrew greets Neil again and explains he took his meds. If he hadn't, he'd be puking from withdrawal by now. Side note, sometimes they refer to Andrew's medication as medicine, and that's not really the right word. Like, they're basically synonyms, so it's not a huge deal, but typically when we're talking about a prescription drug, we use the word medication, not medicine.
I never thought about that. I was like, yeah, that does seem wrong.
Yeah.
Huh.
It's not like a huge deal, it's just like a weird little thing I noticed.
Yeah.
Kevin tells Neil that Andrew always lets him know when he's off his meds, and he asks how Neil figured out the Andrew-Aaron switcheroo earlier. Neil explains that Andrew hates Kevin's obsession with Exy, but Aaron doesn't care. The narration says, Kevin looked to Andrew, but Andrew only had eyes for Neil.
Aww.
This is such a Sakovic-ism to me. The whole, like, only had eyes for. Like, she puts it in these books a lot.
I haven't noticed.
I feel like there are multiple instances of this phrasing, and I don't think I've read this phrasing in, like, anything else.
The only thing I can think of is in, is it Total Recall? Or that movie, Minority Report, when he's getting his eyes replaced at the eye replacer.
Oh my god, yeah, that's Minority Report.
and he's like, and the woman's like holding up the eyeballs, and he's like, look, she only has eyes for you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So Minority Report and Foxhole Court are the only things I've heard that phrase in.
And in at least one of them, in only one of them is it used as a joke.
Yes.
That is interesting.
I'll point them out when it comes back up, because she says it a lot in these books.
Excellent.
Andrew laughs and calls Neil a comedian, then tells Kevin they're leaving because he's hungry. Back in the locker room, Neil waits to go into the showers since Nikki and Aaron are in there. He tells Kevin to leave without him if they don't want to wait, and he'll find his way to Abby's on his own. Andrew asks, Nikki going to be a problem for you? Basically subtly trying to figure out if Neil is homophobic.
Oh my god, I thought he was asking if he thought Nikki was going to sexually assault Neil.
I think Andrew is asking Neil if he would be uncomfortable showering with a gay guy.
Okay, I literally thought he was like, you think Nikki's gonna attack you? And I was like, damn, that's kind of a wild thing to say, casually. I think you're right.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
Okay.
When Neil says it's just about his privacy, Kevin tells him he has to get over his shyness if he's going to be a star.
Which is the funniest fucking thing. You're a star. People are gonna see your naked body. I'm gonna see your naked body. Maybe a lot. Probably a lot. Deal with it.
Andrew says he broke into Wymac's cabinet to read Neil's file, so he knows Neil's parents are supposedly abusive, and he must have scars that he doesn't want anyone to see. Which is super cruel, especially coming from Andrew, who we later learn also has scars that he hides from everyone.
Wait, that's just another thing that gets me, that Andrew's like, my rules protect me, but you don't get to have rules that protect you.
Yeah.
He doesn't have empathy for people based on, like, having similar problems.
Yeah. Later we learn that his black armbands that he always wears hide self-harm scars. Even though Neil is clearly outraged, Andrew explains that Wymack paid for shower stalls when the stadium got built, so Neil doesn't have to wait for the others to finish.
It's kind of funny that Kevin didn't mention that. He could have just said, oh, there's stalls. But he was like, no, people are gonna see your ass.
I think that Kevin is like so intense about that kind of thing. He's like, the shower stalls are a crutch. You need to grow up and face the real world.
When I was on the Ravens, we had to soap each other's bodies.
Oh my god. Neil gets angry at Andrew and feels betrayed by his old coach, Hernandez, who must have told Wymack his suspicions about Neil's parents. Andrew is very amused by Neil's anger, and he admits he didn't actually break into Wymack's cabinet to read Neil's file. He just guessed based on what he overheard from Hernandez.
The classic, you reacted to my guess in a way that I know it's true.
Exactly.
So sneaky.
He got him. Neil realizes Andrew is just trying to make him angry, so he tries to calm down by counting to 10, then makes himself leave the room before he takes a swing at Andrew. In the bathroom, Neil finds that Andrew was telling the truth about the shower stalls. Andrew follows Neil in and sneaks up on him. When Neil instinctively goes to hit Andrew in the ribs with his elbow, Andrew catches it and steps back. Andrew says Wymack's never explained why he bothered with the shower stalls and jokes that it's so the team can grieve their losses in private. He says, only the best for his rising stars, right? Neil says, I didn't think Wymack recruited rising stars. And Andrew says, no, the Foxes will never amount to anything. Try telling Dan that, though, and she'll box your ears. Andrew orders Kevin to the car. Neil showers and gets changed, and they all meet outside the stadium. Nikki drives and tells Neil he gets shotgun, but only because it's his first day, since Kevin hates sitting in the back. Which I think makes sense, because Kevin is extremely much more taller than all four of them.
I did not consider that. That's really funny.
He has to sit in the back with the shortest people. They go to Abigail Winfield's house and let themselves in. She and Wymack are cooking in the kitchen, and Wymack orders Nikki to set the table. Abby tells them to behave in front of their guest, and Wymack says, I don't see any guests. Neil's a fox. He's not going to get any special treatment just because it's his first day. Don't want him thinking this team is anything but dysfunctional, or June will be a rude wake-up call. I love that Wymack is, like, not treating Neil like a guest. He's like, no, you're a fox now, and right off the bat, you're just like one of us, and you're not getting any special treatment, and you have to see how fucked up we are because you're one of us now. Abby gives everyone jobs and tries to reprimand Andrew for the bottle of whiskey he's still carrying around, but Andrew escapes into another part of the house, laughing. Abby introduces herself to Neil and asks, they're not harassing you too much, are they? From the next room, Andrew says, he'll actually take work to break, I think. Give me until August, maybe. Abby starts to warn Andrew not to repeat what happened last year, and Andrew reappears without the whiskey to assure her that B, aka Betsy, can help pick up the pieces like she did with Matt. Later, we're going to learn about how last year, Andrew's lot took Matt to Columbia and forced him to relapse by giving him drugs. Andrew asks Abby if she invited Betsy to dinner tonight, and Abby says Betsy declined because it might make things awkward, which I think is a smart move. Like, I like my psychiatrist plenty, but I wouldn't invite her to dinner.
Very true.
Andrew tells Neil that Betsy is their team's psychiatrist/therapist. I'm not sure if the book knows that there's a difference.
I also... Does she prescribe medicine?
She's like the official person that Andrew is supposed to check in with about his court-mandated meds.
Okay, but she's not necessarily the one who's, like, giving them. I guess she can't really adjust the dose unless she was appointed by the court.
I think she is, though.
Okay.
I think that when, in the second book, when they decide that Andrew has to come off his meds, Betsy is the one who makes that decision.
Okay, so she is a psychiatrist also, it seems like.
But she does, like, counseling for the team also. And I'm not sure if that's something that psychiatrists typically do.
I feel like usually it's not. Like, I've heard that the stereotype is, like, your psychiatrist will not give a shit about you.
Yeah, so I don't know, technically, what her deal is. But Andrew says that Neil will meet her when classes start. When Neil asks if he has to, Abby says semesterly meetings are mandatory for student athletes. Nikki says Betsy's amazing, but Neil doesn't think he'll like her. When dinner is served, Neil sits as far away from Andrew and Kevin as possible and doesn't participate in the conversation. Instead, he observes how the others interact. Kevin and Wymack talk about Exy, Nikki gossips about celebrities, and Andrew stays quiet like Neil. After dinner, Neil has to force himself to get in Wymack's car because he distrusts men old enough to be his father. Neil sits frozen the entire drive to Wymack's apartment, and neither of them talk. Once inside the apartment, Wymack asks Neil if Andrew's lot is going to be a problem, and says, "If they cross a line and you can't get them to back off, you come to me, understand? I don't have perfect control over Andrew, but Kevin owes us his life, and I can get to Andrew through him."
Which I think it amuses me. It's like, okay, we've got this all figured out. I can't quite deal with Andrew, but Kevin owes us his life, so we can kind of work him to work Andrew. I'm like,
yeah.
Like, I know you're doing your best, but that's not a great plan.
Yeah.
It was like, it's a good plan for this situation, but as a plan, it's hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we can just tell Kevin that we got him off the street and we can put him back there, and he'll probably be able to talk Andrew down if he's trying to kill you.
I don't think it's even that Kevin has control over Andrew. I think it's that Wymack would threaten Andrew by saying we could get rid of Kevin.
Okay.
And Andrew, made a deal with Kevin to protect him, so he needs to be with Kevin.
Nice.
Neil just nods and goes to get his duffel bag from Wymack's locked desk drawer. He takes his clothes out to check his things, and he wants to look through his binder too, but he can't take it out with Wymack watching him. Wymack asks, "You plan on wearing the same 6 outfits over and over again this year?" Neil replies, 8, and yes.
I love that. He's like, you will respect that I have 8 separate outfits, because I feel like as a person who also used to not own a lot of clothes, when somebody's like, you only have 3 shirts, I'm like, I have 5 shirts, and that's too many fucking shirts already. I feel like Neil's having a similar thought process. Like he's like, I have 8. That's more shirts than I could ever need. Hop off my dick.
Literally, Neil invented the capsule wardrobe trend. Wymack tells Neil where the laundry room is and demands that he takes what he wants from the kitchen, saying, "It'll piss me off more if you act like a skittish stray cat than it will if you eat the last bowl of cereal." Wymack leaves to go do paperwork, and the chapter ends with Neil going for a run to take his mind off everything. Another chapter where not a whole lot happens.
Yep, just a lot of exposition and a lot of intricate dynamics interweaving.
Yes, but we don't really know about all those intricate dynamics yet.
That's true. But we can feel them humming under the surface like a person who's been filled with insects. Watch the Magnus Archives.
Please watch it. Yeah. Listen to the Magnus Archives. Wow, we've been recording a long time.
Yeah.
Did you have anything we didn't get to?
I guess one thing is when Nikki is talking about his boyfriend, I wrote, I like how Nikki trivia needs to get dropped in the most stilted way possible. Or this is a little bit better than his family backstory, but it's still like, yes, I went to Germany where my boyfriend is. His name is Eric, and we met, and we're brothers, and we are in love. And he just needs to put all that out there immediately instead of just saying oh yeah, Eric, and then not saying who Eric is.
Right. Well, I mean, Neil asks
That's
who Eric
true.
is. And I think that Nikki is just really friendly.
That's true.
I think Nikki really just wants to have friends,
Damn.
and Andrew won't let him.
You're so right. He's just I need to put my entire backstory so that Neil can know everything and we can have things to talk about. I feel like if he ever later learns that Neil went to Germany and didn't tell him, he's going to be so mad. He's going to be like, I want to talk about Germany with you.
You're so right, actually. That's exactly how it would go. Yeah, so chapter 3, not a lot happened, but chapter 4 has a fuck ton going on.
Oh boy.
Chapter 4 is when Andrew threatens to stab Nikki. Neil blows out his arms trying to score on Andrew. Yeah. Neil goes to the court at night and finds Andrew and Kevin. And then we also get the whole, Wymack telling Kevin about the district change, and Wymack tells Neil all about the Yakuza.
Oh, right.
So all of that happens in chapter 4.
Yeah, get ready. Hold on to your butts.
That's going to be a hell of an episode.
Yeah.
I can't wait to get to it.
That one's going to be 3 hours long. If we manage to talk for this long about
nothing in chapter 3, yeah, that one, we might even split it into 2 episodes.
That would be a good idea.
Who's to say?
Marathon episode, we don't sleep for 3 days before recording.
That would be so unhinged. But yeah, and then actually, we could do, if we wanted to make it an extra long episode, we could also cover the Foxhole Court bonus chapter with Wymax POV.
Nice.
Or we could do that as a separate episode.
Next time on the Foxhole cast, we're going to be doing lines of ground up Doritos just to see what it's like to spend a day inside Andrew's head.
Why Doritos?
I don't know. I was kind of rolling with it there. It was a yes and moment.
Just came to you?
Yeah.
I'm sorry I didn't yes and you.
No, I mean, I was yes anding with myself.
With yourself?
Yeah.
Anyway, let us know your thoughts about chapters 3 or look ahead and tell us about chapter 4 at thefoxholecasters@gmail.com or on social media. We are the Foxhole Cast on Tumblr, Instagram, and YouTube. Find all these links and more at thefoxholecast.card.co. Don't forget to rate and comment on the podcast wherever you're listening. Until next time, thanks for tuning in.
You were amazing.